Hope you are all enjoying your Saturday. We have a sunny Saturday morning in Toronto, 0 degrees Celsius, but it feels like a little bit colder than that. Those who are used to tune in, thank you very much for your fidelity. Those who it's their first time, warm welcome and thank you very much for tuning in. And we greatly appreciate to have you on board today. Without all of you, we won't be able to express our passion and dedication to our Africa, our mother, our future. We have, ladies and gentlemen, my co-host, our sister Cynthia Chirinda. Good day, Sister Cynthia. How are you doing, sister? Good to see you.
Greetings, Dr. Diallo. We are experiencing snow here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's great to have our loyal listeners who are always joining us and our viewers. Looking forward to the broadcast this morning. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Sister Cynthia. Our brother John Daniels, aka JB in Accra. Good afternoon, brother JB. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Doc.
Good
Accra
to
is fine, just that we are getting to the rainy season, so it rained this morning. Otherwise, everything is cool in Accra.
Nice.
I'm just
Nice. And our brother, Dr. Francis Mpindu in Toronto, I don't know if he's already in, maybe not yet, maybe a little bit later, so we'll introduce him after. We have also our brother Teo Yaoboki is our producer of this program in Toronto. We really appreciate all the hard work he does behind the scene prior to and during the broadcast. Our topic today, developing Africa with the youth. Indeed, very interesting topic. And the importance of the youth in the development of Africa. 1.5 hour program, I believe, would certainly not be enough to discuss the contribution of the youth in the development of our continent. Today's Africa, we have promised all ourselves to devote a large place to our youth, our hope for today and for tomorrow. We do believe it's always interesting to hear the young ones' viewpoints. I'm so glad we dedicate our program today to the valiant African youth. Developing Africa with the youth is an important and timely topic. Developing Africa with the youth is a great idea. As the youth of Africa, as I said, are the future of the continent and have the potential to drive positive change. Developing Africa with the youth is an essential aspect of sustainable development in the continent. Developing Africa with the youth is a powerful idea that can transform the continent. Africa is home to a young and dynamic population with the majority of its population under the age of 25. This demographic advantage presents a unique opportunity for Africa to leverage its youthful population to harness the energy to drive creativity, economic growth, social development, political, and technological innovation of the continent. There is no doubt that Africa has the potential for tremendous growth and development, and the youth of the continent will play, as I said, a critical role in shaping its future. Developing Africa with the youth can be a powerful way to bring about positive change and progress, fresh ideas, energy, and passion on the continent. Today, we have a very special guest, the perfect guest to discuss this topic, Mutita Masowe in Zambia. So I don't know if our guest is already in, not yet. I see Dr. Mpindu. Good morning, Dr. Mpindu. Good to see you, Doc.
Good morning, Dr. Diallo. It's good to see you too.
Thank you. Thank you
Good
very
morning
much.
to all the panelists. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes. So we're just waiting our special guest to join.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
So maybe while we are waiting for our guest to join, just maybe a few words. And in this case, before we deep dive in our today's topic, I would like to have, you, my co-host, to address few words. Honor to the lady first, Sister Cynthia. What do you have to say for our nice and interesting topic today?
Thank you very much, Dr. Diallo. I am a mother of 3 beautiful girls and 2 amazing sons. And those are just some of my biological children, but I have been blessed with so many other children in so many other ways. And when I look at these amazing gifts that we have been blessed with on the continent of Africa, I am grieved many times because I look at the unique potential that they have, yet many times they are not able to convert that unique talent and contribute meaningfully towards the development of Africa. So the question then lies with us as parents, as community leaders, as national leaders. What are we doing to enable our young people to be accommodated meaningfully so that they do not only participate and contribute towards developing Africa, but they actually take positions where they are recognized, where they're not just invited as token participants, but their voice is actually enabled. I know that mentoring has its space, and we need to be deliberate about intergenerational mentoring. However, I feel that sometimes we have perpetual mentoring, which is going on without us actually allowing these young mentees to get their hands dirty and actually begin to get into the developing of the continent in a meaningful and practical way. I believe that until we accommodate these young thought leaders, we are running the risk of, firstly, them getting disengaged in the continent and in the affairs of the continent. Very recently, we were just discussing about the flight of our very powerful brains from the African continent. And this can be avoided if we actually take time to acknowledge what they're bringing on board and allow them to actually take on meaningful positions in governments, in local governments and national government level. So I would say let us move away from the stifling. So I started by saying that I am a mother. And one of the things that a mother does is to protect. And I think that we need to be very balanced as leaders, whether we're parents or whether we are institutional leaders, to move away from just trying to protect them, to allow them to be exposed and to equip them so that they can be released to meaningfully participate. So I speak about this passionately from a personal perspective because I believe that until we release them, we are stifling them. So I hope that all of our listeners who are out there are also going to take in their spheres of influence and say, what is it that they are doing to not only equip, but also to ensure that they release so that the young people can be practically involved. Those are some of my introductory thoughts, Dr. Diallo. Thank you so much for co-hosting with me today.
Thank you very much, Sister Cynthia. Thank you very much. Actually, guys, I'm seeing our special guest is already online. Thank you, Sister Mutinta Masowe. I was saying Africa is home to young and dynamic population with the majority of its population under the age of 25. This demographic advantage presents a unique opportunity for Africa to leverage its youthful population to harness energy, to drive creativity, economic growth, social development, political and technological innovation of the continent. And I was saying today we have a very, very special guest, the perfect guest to discuss this topic, Mutinta Masowe in Zambia. To have a fair and accurate introduction, I will let her do it for me. Good afternoon, Mutinta. We are so glad to have you in our program today. First of all, who is Mutinta? Please, the floor is yours, Mutinta. You see, we lost her for the time being. We lost her. Oh, she's back. You hear me, Mutinta? Mutinta, do you hear me? I think, Mutinta, our guest is having a little bit of a few technical problems in terms of audio. While we are resolving
Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you. Okay, so
okay.
So thank you. I was saying today we have a very special guest, the perfect guest to discuss this topic. Mutinta Masowe in Zambia. And I was saying to have a fair and accurate introduction, I will let you introduce yourself. Good afternoon, Mutinta. We are so glad you in our program today. First of all, who is Mutinta? Please, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. So my name is Mutinta Masowe. I'm an educator. I'm a public speaker, social accountant, reproductive health, and also climate change advocate. I'm also a young youth who participated in the just ended the United Nations LDC 5, which is the least developed countries conference that recently happened in Qatar, and where we as young people adopted, of course, we adopted the declaration, the youth declaration for all generations. That was the youth declaration. So basically, of course, coming from the, of course, LDC, just there to make sure that I'm part of the solution in making sure that the young people sit on the table and not just being other people making decision on or for us as young people, but also being part of decision making process. So that when we advocate, we want all the young people to sit on the table to share brilliant ideas. So basically, that's just about Mutinta. Yeah.
Thank you, Mutinta. It's so good to hear, and it's refreshing to hear what you just said. And you were saying, you know, our youthful, our young fellows should be part of the solution, should be part of the decision making, and it's our philosophy in today's Africa. We said, you know, the youth, we need to hear you. We need to have you part of the decision making, obviously. So before I ask you my first question, which is, in fact, I have mentioned it today, I have mentioned before, the youth play a crucial role in developing Africa by bringing fresh ideas, energy, and passion to the task. And I will ask you, after my co-host address few words, I ask you what you have to say about that. But before that, I will have my brother, JB, to address few words, and then Dr. Francis Mpindu. Brother JB, what do you have to say about our topic today and what you are discussing?
Thank you, Doc. Yeah, thank you, Doc. Yeah. You know, when you look at the demographics of the world, population demographics, you see that the youth have the majority population among the human beings on earth. And when we come to Africa, as in the industrialized countries, there's especially in fertility. When we come to Africa, rather, we have very active fertility on our continent, so that we have a lot of youth population in Africa. And if Africa is going to progress, definitely everything will depend on the youth. And we should equip the youth to be able to lead the development of Africa going forward. And that goes to the way we educate our youths, the way we give them skills to be entrepreneurial, the way we give them the chance to be in the decision-making process, and what have you. So there's no guessing about the fact that African governments should help the youth in their various countries to be the leading role for the development of Africa. After all, during our time in school, we didn't have the internet and the AI and all those things. And now the African youth have accepted the challenge at the universities. They are doing artificial intelligence, they are doing technology and what have you. And the world is moving towards technology, and artificial intelligence. So when we equip our youth with these skills, and we give them the chance to be part of the decision-making progress, then Africa will be going forward. So this is my initial comments that I'll give. Doc.
Thank you, Brother JB. And developing Africa with the youth is, as I said, is essential for the continent's sustainable development. We need to invest in education. We need to provide access to technology. We need to promote youth entrepreneurship. We need to create and enable environment, in order to ways to develop Africa with the youth, with using them and having them part of the decision making. So we need to listen to hear them, to listen to them, to hear them. With the right investment and support, Africa's youth can be the driving force for the continent growth and prosperity. Dr. Mpindu, what do you have to say about that?
Dr. Diallo, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate, and you are a great host, and it's good to see each one of the panelists here today. And I'm very pleased that today we have someone who, as far as we know, is a practitioner when it comes to working with young people in Africa, and she is young herself compared to me. So, and so, Brother JD mentioned some comments that are worth looking into. The whole idea of the value of education. How are we educating our young people? And let's face it, education is not necessarily formal education. It can be informal. So we need to maintain that balance. And Madame Cynthia mentioned or raised the question about, or rather within the context of the uniqueness of our population in Africa, and yet our young people, sometimes their talents are not being recognized, or they are not participating in the decision-making process, which really raises some questions. And I hope that our sister Mutinta, Muleshan Mutinta,
She's muted. She's muted.
We know Muleshan.
Did we know? So I'm really hoping that we will be able to have a dialogue here that will unearth a number of things that would impact our young people. One of the things I'm very concerned about is you mentioned, Mutinta, that you just came back from Qatar. One of the things that usually baffles me is when we organize these important, significant, strategic meetings, sometimes the key players who are supposed to be there are not there. We have a representation of one or two people. And to me, those are some of the issues we need to address. Representation is very, very important. For example, a lot of our political parties in Africa, I mean, we are neighbors to Zambia. I am from Zimbabwe. We see that political parties engage young people. The young people are doing all the campaigning. They're doing all the runaround and all the groundwork. When it comes to the decision-making process, who gets what done at a higher level or in senior positions, the young people tend to be excluded. So it's almost like we are continuing this colonial approach of capitalizing on availability of young people, but we don't engage them beyond that. So I'm really, really hoping that from our discussion today, we're going to end up with a more, a livelier, a refreshed Afrocentric optimism, where we are reviving who we are and saying, let's do something about who we are and let's progress, let's move forward, engage our young people so that we continue to make all these changes. Let's face it, and I'll say this and then I'll be quiet. A lot of the founding fathers of Africa were young when they started what they started. President Nelson Mandela, Robert Mugabe, Julius Nyerere, Kenneth Kaunda, Jomo Kenyatta, Kwame Nkrumah. They were very young when they started their political movements. And so we cannot move forward if we do not engage these young people. So this whole idea of saying, the leaders of tomorrow, we need to kick that out yesterday. They are not the leaders of tomorrow, they're the leaders of today and tomorrow. So I think we need to wake up. Anyway, don't get me started. Let me stop right there.
Thank you, Dr. Mpindu. And I was saying it, our young fellows there, not only the leader, as you said, of tomorrow, but the leader of today. And I was saying previously, the youth can play a crucial role in developing Africa by bringing fresh ideas, energy, and passion to the task. But they need to be heard. They need to be part of decision making. So, what do you have to say beside what Dr. Mpindu said and Sister Cynthia and Brother JB said? What do you have to say about that, Mutinta? You are muted.
All right, maybe whilst you're waiting for her to unmute, Mutinta, can you hear us?
Do you hear us?
Maybe I'll just ask a question through you before I request to be excused from the broadcast. I just wanted to find out from Mutinta, in addition to what you had asked her, what the resolutions were at the meeting that they attended, and also how it is that we could support her. I can see, I think we have lost her connectivity there. But through you, our main host, Dr. Diallo, my question would be, when they attended this summit, this meeting, this conference, what were their resolutions and how would they like us to be able to come alongside and be able to meaningfully support them? Because I think one of the tragedies we have on the African continent is we have so many resolutions and wonderful things written on paper, so many commitments, yet we lack in the implementation. And sometimes it's because the support is not there. So my question to Mutinta would be, what resolutions, what were some of your key resolutions from your just ended summit? And how can we come alongside you to be able to practically support you so that these things can be enacted?
Thank you, Sister Cynthia. Mutinta, Do you hear us? Yes. Okay. So you are muted. Maybe you can unmute yourself. Hello. Okay. You are yeah. Have you heard the questions? Otherwise, I can repeat the questions.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with my network.
No problem. So, do you want me to repeat the questions?
Though I didn't hear the question correctly, but
Okay,
I just want to say something on
yeah, the first question I was saying, as I said, I mentioned earlier, the youth can play a crucial role in developing Africa by bringing fresh ideas, energy, and passion to the task. So, what do you have to say about that? And then our sister Cynthia also asked the question about you recently attended a meeting, a summit in Qatar, and what was the resolution of the meeting you attended? She was saying, most of the time there is a lot of resolutions, but there is no follow-up, and it's just tabled and no support for to bring those resolutions in practice, to bring those resolutions in life. So, what do you have to say about those two questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So, am I audible enough?
Yes, you are. Go ahead, please.
Oh, all right. So, in relation to the event that just happened, of course, the event is for the least developed countries conference. So, when you look at the conference itself, it was designed to, of course, we had different stakeholders that came through. We had, of course, the heads of state. We had the young people, of course, all from all the 49 countries, least developed countries, plus the small islands as well. So we had CSOs in other private sectors. So the good part about the conference that I liked is the intergenerational part. So when you look at sustainability, I think for me it can, for young people to take part in decision making processes, it has to start from having intergenerational dialogues, because I feel there is a fear of the unknown amongst our leaders, because I don't know if they see our young people to be threats, but that should not be the case, because of course we always say young people are the is it they are the leaders of tomorrow, which is not the case, but we say young people are the leaders of today, and that has to go down to all the like for every generation to come. So I raised up a point where we had to say, for instance, for Africa to develop, and for all the least developed countries to develop, we need the same youth that are fighting right now to take up leadership spaces. In some years to come, they won't be youths anymore. They will be world leaders. So they should not abandon the youth agenda and focus on other things. They should also focus on the young people, because once upon a time they were youth, but because they are no longer youth, they will now speak a different language. So it has to come also from the youth to be authentic enough once they take up leadership spaces, to stop being corrupt, to also follow the agenda of young people, because that's what they were fighting for. It doesn't make sense one abandons the young people agenda just because they are no longer called young people. That's why we are finding issues for us to develop as Africa, because most of our young people have taken advocacy, have taken speaking up as show business. Just because someone is unable to have a job today, they will stand up and say, I'm an activist. Tomorrow they have a job, they stop the whole agenda. So it's a very big problem that we have. And it's only us, the so called young people now, who will be able to change the Africa and make it into something that we would want it to be. Only if we stick to our promises, if we stick to um, our agenda, we stick to making the processes, decision making processes open enough for every young person to come through and offer ideas. So that's the part I like most about the intergenerational dialogues. And also I like the part whereby you mentioned about education. Yes, education should be a driving force of every young person out there, because once you are educated, it's not just a classroom setup, but it is something that we have to learn every day. As we are growing, we learn something. So I was saying that the whole event that we had, if only.
Hello, it seems we are losing Mutinta. Mutinta, do you hear me? Oh, we lost her. Okay, so
she has raised some very powerful points right there.
yeah,
And I think it's quite impressive, Dr. Diallo, that she felt that there was that intergenerational exchange, which I believe is very important, because there is a lot that the young people can learn from the older generation. But at the same time, they need to ensure that they are being accommodated. So it is a good thing that she made that observation. I think one of the things that we may want to hear from her as well is what are some of the practical challenges that she finds herself and her peers facing and having to deal with within the landscape that she's operating, so that we also know how we can participate collectively to help them to lend a voice. And I know that they are doing quite a lot of advocacy, but we do know that they have a lot of structural and systemic challenges that are still there. So those are some of the things that we hope she can also share with us, because we have listeners who are out there who are listening, and some of them are equipped and have the capacity to also get engaged and be able to support. She's back with us. Hopefully she
yes,
can continue.
yeah. Thank you, Sister Cynthia. Mutinta, so maybe you can. Do you hear us, Mutinta? You are muted.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay. So I was mentioning that we as young people, of course, would want to have these brilliant ideas, but at the end of the day, you find that maybe we are doing it because we are finding we don't have any other things to do. But when we have something to do, something that will give us income, we just sit back and we forget about the agenda. So those are the things that we spoke about, like on the part of young people taking leadership spaces. And also, in terms of education, like I was mentioning, I believe education should be able to be beneficial for an individual. Looking at the school structures, I always advocate for better curriculums, because you don't expect young people to deliver when you have been teaching them something that is out of context, something that won't benefit their life, something that would just be there for the sake of, oh, they went to school. So I advocate for us to, if we were to have education, let us aim to have quality education, which will benefit our young people. Because we as, of course, as Africa, we should develop our young people to have skills that they will go out there and use, and also to become innovative enough. And also, we cannot ask young people to become more innovative if there is not enough funding. So funding should be there, and people that need funding are those people that don't even have literacy skills. So I feel there should be a balanced scale between us, who call ourselves literate, and those that have not had a benefit of going to school, so that at least if we were to tackle hunger, we can also tackle it by not leaving anyone behind. I also speak like when we say young people, we are limiting it only for those young people who are able-bodied, the so-called the normal. But then we are forgetting that a young person who is in an LDC country and is or has a disability is more worse to find different challenges out there: lack of funding, lack of protection, um, of course, discrimination, and so on and so forth, cultural practices. So those are the things that I see to hinder us as Africa, because we are still primitive on certain issues, and we want to say we want to tackle certain issues, and yet we leave a certain component of people in the society. And you and I know that the people with disability are very intelligent and they can have space to speak from this for themselves about the challenges they face, and also adding on to the ideas that will benefit our countries. But we don't do that. We try to limit ourselves and go to these conferences and speak, sleep in hotels, and fly in planes. At the end of the day, leaving the real beneficiaries and the people who have not had chance to go to school. So if we want to have a balance, we need to have maybe advocacy on always and eradicate poverty, because poverty is something that is a central challenge that is influencing all these other problems. Yeah, submit.
Thank you, thank you. You're absolutely right. Education is a foundation of development, and investing in the education of the youth can go a long way in developing Africa. Governments and organizations can work together to provide quality education that is accessible to all youth, regardless of their background, regardless of their financial status, regardless whether they have challenges, whether disabled or not. It should be for access for all. So you are absolutely right. I will pass on the floor to Brother JB if you have question or you have comment on what Sister Cynthia and Mutinta just said.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. And that's an interesting revelation our guest has given us. But I'm thinking that, yes, we should give the youth the opportunity to be part of the decision-making process. But how many of the youths in our countries can be part of the decision-making process? Majority of them are living there somewhere and going about normal duties. So the education system we are putting in place should be said that it will train the youth to be independent, more entrepreneurial, more startups to be given, more businesses with the internet and what have you. But you see, when we go for the loans, we are going to build hospitals, bridges, roads, but we have forgotten that this human resource, the youth of Africa, that's where we should rather invest in, because they are the people who can get the modern jobs, who are given raise the modern money finances for our countries, and leave the youth out of the whole system. And I will wish that all African government will put emphasis on their youth policies, not necessarily creating football pitch or setting football clubs or sports and what have you. But we have youth in almost every part of the country. So if the youth are equipped to set up small startups and with little loans here and there, I think in their individual capacities, they will also contribute to the GDP of our countries. But as I look at African countries now, yeah, they leave the youth to just be there. And there's no serious policies on the youth development. And if you all agree that the youth is the future of African countries, because they are in the majority, of course, they are the leaders now and the future, then we should deliberately, through our policies, empower the youth to take up the challenges that we all know they should have. And yeah, sister, I think that's the nice view you have given. But which other areas you want our governments to tackle to empower our youth? Which other areas you want our governments in Africa to tackle to empower our youth? That's my question.
Thank you, Brother JB. And youth participation, young people need to be included in the decision-making process at all levels of society, from local governments to national governments. Governments and civil society organizations can create platform for youth to engage in in civic and political process. And also you talk about, Matinta talk about social inclusion. Addressing issues of social inclusion, exclusion, and marginalization is essential for ensuring that all young people have equal opportunities to succeed. This includes addressing issues such as poverty, gender inequality, and discrimination. So, Dr. Pindo, what do you have to say? It seems we lost momentarily. We lost our guest, but before she comes back, so maybe you have a few comments and questions to address to our guest.
Thank you, Dr. Diallo, and thank you for this opportunity to really interact on things that are very, very close to our hearts. And I'm glad to see that she's back, and hopefully she's hearing us. She has raised some very, very good points. Especially in the area of inclusivity, making sure that even some of the young people who might be differently abled would be able to be recognized and participate in this. And then on the note about brilliant ideas that young people would run with only because that's what they are interested in. But once they find a job, she says, some of them would end up dropping the ball and focus on other aspects, which is a reality, because one of the things that has come up in some of the most recent surveys done on our young people in Africa, things to do with young people losing trust in leadership. Our young people struggling with unemployment, our young people struggling with environmental issues. These are real issues that impact how they dialogue with others. Let me go back to what I am thinking in terms of fundamental issues here. One of them is, okay, it's important for us to gather our young people in places where we can dialogue, have a safe environment where they can talk about different things that are impacting on people. But I think, and I know I am limited in so many ways, and I acknowledge and admit that I'm very, very biased. Why would we go to Qatar, one of the most expensive places, to have a conference where we know not many of these young people from not so or the least developed countries would even be able to go? Number one, think of what it takes to have young people there. Yes, it's important for them to get exposure, but whose agenda is it? That's my point. I want us to be analytical when we talk about engaging our young people and ourselves in the global forum. Whose agenda are we following? I think it's very important for us, because if we fail to be analytical, we're going to let other people run the show, and we're still going to be used by other people, and we're not utilizing our own skills and participate in this global village that we're in. It really annoys me that sometimes some people come up with these agendas and they take us someplace and they hijack the whole thing. They become the heroes. They propagate the kinds of things that make them look good because they raised the funds for this conference and for this forum. But when we look at who is really driving the force, who is really driving the agenda, we find that sometimes our young people are not even part of that, which takes me back to what the Professor Lumumba says. We cannot afford to be the dinner at these conferences. We cannot allow other people to continue to eat us up. We should be seated around the table and interact with others. So those were some of the comments I just wanted to highlight. Let's be analytical. Let's engage the young people, as you said, Dr. Diallo. Let's involve them. let's involve our young people. So I'm really glad that we have Mutinta today, and hopefully we're not going to scare her, because we want to see her continue to rise up and be an advocate, be an, African, a Pan-Africanist.
Thank you, Dr. Pindo. Actually, your questions, rejoin, Sister Cynthia questions. So so why Qatar? Whose agenda? Who's driving the agenda? What's your impression, Mutinta, about the resolution in terms of effectiveness for the benefit of Africa and African? What do you have to say?
Okay, in terms of for the benefit of Africa, first of all, I would like to applaud my government, of course, the government of Zambia, for agreeing at least for us to have the African Union summit that took place just right here in Zambia. Though we didn't have enough capacity, of course, like other countries, of course, developed countries, but then it was kind of an eye opener that there's a lot that we need to do for our country, plus also for the president to agree to have it here for the first time. It was really some like an act of bravery, because we had different people coming from different places. And my issue is that, for instance, of course, the other speaker mentioned about involvement of young people. Yes, it is. It is something that we need to think about when we say we are involving young, but also a representation of one young person who made, of course, some recommendations and spoke on behalf of the rest of us after we had our own youth summit. That is the pre-conference before the actual summit for the heads of state. So if it was like for Qatar, for me, I think I don't really, despite the whole conference happening there, I look at it as in it's kind of like an exposure for some of us young people who have not really had a chance to visit places like that. For me, if I was to tell you that I didn't come back the same, because I asked myself a question: if this place is able to look this good, what is stopping us from having our country look this good? The infrastructure, the development itself, and just the way people professionalism in terms of the way people are doing their jobs. I asked myself a question, and being in the presence of other young people doing brilliant things in their own country, I came back and started asking myself this question: am I doing enough? Because I've been to a place I've never been before. And thankfully, the government of Qatar it really helped in terms of helping with the funding going there and coming back, and everything was catered for. Of course, maybe just to say it was a fully funded thing, but looking at it, it would have been nice if at all the other funders from different countries which are developed funded that thing of coming to have it our own country, or rather our countries from here, Africa. And also, it would be nice if they had to hold it in a least developed country. At least it would make sense if we say we need this to be done, and we are making reference to and everything that is being seen around, not just seeing fancy things here and there. It's good for the exposure, but then it's also good for the development, because of course it boosts the economy as well of that particular country that is hosting. So I'm kind of like in between. I'm on limbo to say exposure is good. I think I mentioned before I cut, before the cock cut, before I was kicked out of course I was kicked out of the room. I mentioned that having us go that side to Qatar, should have been a wake-up call on the heads of state, asking themselves a question: if this place is able to look this good, why are we failing to have our own places look like this? That should have been the question that they should have asked themselves.
Thank you. Again,
Can I
Mutinta.
just weigh in quickly before I leave Dr. Diallo? I think
Yes.
she raised very good points there. The exposure is absolutely good, and I'm glad that she went on with that hat where she was not just saying, wow, this is great, but then also to say, how do we also get Africa to be developed to this stage? And again, I think it's very important for her to also begin to unbundle the question that Dr. Francis Mpindu is asking here, which is a very important question to say, what was the agenda of the organizers? And how do we make sure that that agenda dovetails with our African development agenda? Because sometimes you can have a very good agenda on the part of the hosts, but we also then need to look at it and say, how is this also equipping us so that this agenda becomes a collaborative effort that adds value to not only the hosts of the summits, not only the funders, but also meaningfully adds value to us. So I hope that Cynthia was also able to think through that question that Dr. Francis Mpindu asked, to say what was their agenda and how is that agenda also propelling the agenda of us developing our continent. But the exposure doubtless is really important, and we are grateful, I must say, that these countries are making these platforms available so that our young people can also actually go there and see what is there. The question is, once we get there, how do we also make sure that we are working with not only within the agenda, but working with the agenda to propel our own development agenda? I think that's how I would like to weigh in on that. I'm not sure, Mtinta, if you have managed to catch on some of our thoughts and some of what we wanted to know from you in terms of how you reflected on utilizing the host agenda to also propel our African development agenda.
Thank you, Sister Cynthia. Mutinta. I think she will having a little bit of technical difficulties today.
Yes.
Yes. Do you hear? Have you heard the question? What just Sister Cynthia said?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do. We can. Yeah. Go. Oh, we lost her. We lost her again. Yes. Yes. Maybe she will come back a little bit later on. We are having today. Sorry for that. For all our listeners, we are having some technical difficulties from our guest today. Maybe network problem. But JB, maybe you can weigh on it. What just Sister Cynthia said before we let Dr. Francis Mpindu to have on her take on it.
Yeah.
Brother JB.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Because the two questions asked by Doctor and Cynthia are very important questions. Because most of the time you say that, oh, there's this meeting here, spread by who, and at the end of the day, the agenda may not be relevant to the needs of Africa. So what Doctor and Sister asked, they just wanted to find out who were the sponsors of the conference in Qatar and what were the decisions taken. And are the decisions going to benefit Africa? And I think these are real issues that our sister, the guests, should address. Otherwise, we are always happy when our youths are given the opportunity to learn new things. But all those things that they will learn, all those new things that they will learn should be relevant to the development of Africa or the problems of Africa, solving the problems of Africa. And that's where what is important to all of us. So if she's back, maybe she will rather answer the question as to who were the sponsors of that conference, and then we take it from there.
Yes. Okay. I think she's back. Mutinta, do you hear us? Have you heard the questions? You are muted.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So
Okay. Have you heard the question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
the sponsors of the conference were the Qatar Foundation through the Qatar government. We also had United Nations also sponsoring it. Like they were the main funders for the whole program there. So with us as young people, we were invited to be part of the conference by United Nations. Of course, through also with the help of a platform that we got capacity before going. We had capacity building trainings by Doha Debate. So Doha Debates is it's a platform, or rather a studio where they have different debates, of course, in regards to governance, both from the Middle East or different parts of the world. So those are the people, like I think I can say the main funders that helped us with capacity and also say finances to travel to go and witness the summit there, and also have the chance to have our own youth summit and perhaps look at the youth declaration and also adopt it for the young people, of course, in regards to all generations. So there was a program which was being discussed before that. It's called the
I think we are losing, we are having problem again. So, Mutinta, Dr. Mpindu, maybe you can, while trying to have her back, maybe we can have your thought about the questions we are asking in terms of effectiveness, the takeaway from Qatar meeting. Mutinta? Okay, so Dr. Mpindu, the main question, and what was the takeaway from that conference, and how it's effective and how it's beneficial to African in terms of propelling African development?
Those are fundamental questions, Dr. Diallo, and I don't think that we would be doing justice if we don't get to connect the dots and say, okay, having spent that much money, and we are very appreciative of the government of Qatar and the UN sponsoring this summit or this conference. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of the agenda. Yes, we may never fully understand what really transpired there, but I'm hoping that our daughter of the African soil, Mutinta Masowe, would help us and say, okay, these were the takeaways, not just her personal reflection, and say, okay, I think I would be able to ask myself the question, okay, so if they have developed so much in Qatar, how come we're not doing that in Zambia? But I want us to think along the lines of Africa as a whole. What were the resolutions? And I think Madam Cynthia mentioned this earlier. What were the takeaways? What were the resolutions that would then have an application within the African context? Because let's move away from intellectual gymnastics where we engage in conversations that are really nice. We come up with good reports, but nothing happens beyond that. How does it now affect us practically? What are the practical takeaways? What is now going to be different in Africa as a result of this? What were the resolutions? How is Africa going to be different based on the participation of our young people? And like I said, Mutinta, who is one of our young African leaders, yes, you attended that, you participated, you came away with personal reflections on, I would like to see Zambia do A, B, C, D, but let's think Africa here. How did this conference contribute to a better Africa? What were the takeaways? And I think that was the exact question that Madam Cynthia mentioned earlier. What were the takeaways? What were the resolutions for Africa? If she could enlighten us on that, I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Mpindu. Yes, Mpindu. So what was the takeaway, the main takeaway from that conference that will be beneficial to Africa? So maybe you can share with us your thought and what you heard about that before I share with you a question from a listener. So go ahead, Mpindu, please.
She's muted.
She's muted. You're muted, Mpindu. Mpindu? Okay. Maybe I can, while she, okay, she's, we are having really difficulties today. Sorry about that. But I can share maybe with us, with you, co-host, a question from a listener. And the person was saying, too many programs that are offered by young people of African, Latin American, and communities of what are considered non-essential contributors are programs that are token in nature by the people that are in control of the financial investing. Most programs are not about assimilation into the economic environment and development, but about being educated, generally to go after a dream. Maybe we can have Mpindu. Do you hear me? Okay, so, and the listener was saying, the problem is simple. Our youth are looking toward a dream as opposed to looking forward to financial fidelity that will allow them to have a better quality of life. The paradigm shift must start with the mindset of the individuals responsible for development. It's a question or comment question from a listener. Mpindu, are you back?
Maybe whilst we're waiting for her to reconnect, I'll just weigh in on that question. And that's a good observation by the listener, Dr. Diallo, because token seats, token, just that word by itself, we have seen that being very prevalent in a lot of international summits. And we need to be very careful that we do not continue to perpetuate that culture and pattern, because yes, there is excitement by our young people being in these places, and it is good that they get to see the global perspective and also get to see what other countries are doing. But until and unless we begin to translate that meaningfully towards our own development agenda, we do not have a collective and a wholesome goal that is being achieved as an outcome of their exposure. So of particular interest to me would have been to understand what the resolutions were, and also how some of our participants, when they come back home, take the opportunity to also equip those that remain back home to say, this is what we saw, this is what we got exposed to, and how can we begin to engage meaningfully so that through our exposure, we can now also take ourselves to the next level. So I agree that with our listener, that observation of saying that there has been this tokenism culture that's going on. I believe that we, the young people, we ourselves, the older generation and the young people, can collectively work together and say, welcome back home. Now, what have you learned from what you got exposed to? And how do you convert that opportunity to be able to equip others and also develop an agenda that moves us forward? What proposals are you making to the policy makers, and what questions are you giving to those that are governing our countries so that they can also move towards the development? Because one of the words that Mpindu kept saying was being able to be in an environment which is developed. And this is what the topic is today. how do young people develop Africa? Getting exposure is very good. So how do we make that practical going forward? That's what I would say in response to what our listener has submitted.
Thank you, Sister Cynthia. I believe Muchinta is back. Muchinta, do you hear us? I have a second question, a great question again from another listener. But before I share with you that question, maybe we can try to see if Muchinta is effectively back. Muchinta, do you hear us? Okay. Go ahead. Okay. We are really having difficulty today, but sorry about that again. Yes, go ahead. Okay, maybe I can share with you the second question. This question is from a listener again. It's a great question. The listener was saying the older generation must look at the fact that we were handicapped with limited opportunities for advancement. Today, the old must look at the issues many of us seem to have forgotten. Our advancement came through unity and in the sharing of information. Brother JD, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, but that's what I've been saying all along when we start the program. But definitely, for every conference or meeting that we undertake on behalf of Africa, I think we should take something away from that meeting to our home countries and make sure that our government take it and use it to benefit our people. Because I was going to ask Martinta whether, I was going to ask her how many African countries, youth from African countries were represented. Was the AU also part of that conference? And how is it going to resonate in the various African countries, the youth of African governments? We are dwelling on the youth. So what about conference that we waste money to attend? We should make sure that the end result is beneficial to our countries, the use of our countries.
Thank you.
It's unfortunate, I guess it's not able to, but okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. Maybe I don't know if she's back. Muchinta, are you back? You are muted. If you hear us, maybe you can unmute yourself. Muchinta?
Oh yeah. Yes, I'm here.
Please. The main question is, what was the main outcome from the conference in Qatar, and how the outcome will be beneficial to the African countries, to Africa in general. What do you have to say?
Okay. So in terms of the conference, there was a program of action called the Doha Program of Action, which the heads of state, of course, discussed and adopted. So the heads of state spoke about how they can leverage digital platforms like digital education to help out boost the LDCs, which are the least developed countries. They also spoke on how they could eradicate poverty. So how do they do that is through, of course, empowerment, of course, of women and young people. They spoke also on how they could promote, for instance, agriculture, green economy issues. They also talked about enough funding for LDCs so that they could reach what is called graduation, because of course this conference is held every after 10 years. So some countries, of course, Zambia was about to graduate, but because the World Bank mentioned that it's not yet ready to graduate because of, I think, the inflation issues that had Zambia faced, so it couldn't graduate. So they spoke on how, of course, the least developed countries should be able to operate in order for them to attain graduation. and it is through the Doha Program of Action that each and every head of state that represented their countries, of course, had to speak about it and had adopted to take to their countries and implement. So the question here at hand is that after the Doha Program of Action, of course, after young people have been sent there, they are back. What next? So this is where now each and every one of us from who represented our countries, we have to sit together and see on how we can track the Doha Program of Action. And also it is resonating with the for all generation, of course, the declaration that the young people made. So I don't know about other LDCs on how the youth are operating, but here, with the rest of my other colleagues, the other youth delegates, of course, I think we are the four of us. We've wrote to the ministry to see on how best we can track the implementation process regarding the same Doha program of action, and also we are kind of engaging with other youth and telling them, of course, on what went there and what was talked about and what declaration when we represented our countries got ourselves into. Because when we went there, we didn't go as individuals, but we went as the youth of Zambia representing the whole country. So whatever might happen, it is affecting every young person that is in our country. So it is for me, since I'm in a different town with the rest of the other three, for me, I believe I'm responsible for the declaration and I'm responsible for of course, the young people of Zambia, but mostly the young people of my town, which is the central province, of course, the Kawe to be specific, and other neighboring districts. So I do capacity building and letting them know, of course, what was discussed, so that they are also trained to hold their leaders accountable regarding what was talked about. So it doesn't really make sense for other young people to sit throughout the people that represented their countries, because this is the part whereby they have to see and track, of course, the implementation process. Because the program, of course, was made, funding or was talked about. Is the funding coming through to LDCs? That's what we must be able to track. We must be able to also see if at all the speeches that were done by the heads of state are resonating to what is being implemented on the ground, because the real issue is on the ground and not what is being talked about on the podium. So that's the most big involvement that young people right now, those that represented their countries and also the ones that are in the country, should get involved in social accountability, of course, because you will be able to know exactly what is happening in your country if you take part in civil or rather civic engagement processes. So maybe in a nutshell, I would also want to talk about the whole the like the conference itself. um i hope I hope, as of course, as young people of our continent, we start engaging with our leaders and holding them accountable, because it won't make sense flying 7 hours to go to that place only to go and see about how beautiful the city is, and yet not following up on what was talked about. Meaning, it was just it was not even in the case of us going there if at all we don't do something. So I speak to my fellow youth every time and making a recommendation that regardless of your status in the community or in your country, you are responsible for whatever happens, because at the end of the day, you have the right to cast that vote, and the so-called leader that you're going to choose at that moment is a reflection of yourself, because it's about them selling themselves to you and you looking at them and say, okay, this one, I pick this one to be my leader. And at the end of the day, if they disappoint you, meaning it's you also who are disappointed yourself, because you are the one that was casting, and you need to have good judgment for you to be represented very well by whoever you choose to be your leader. So yeah, basically that's that I can speak about in terms of the Doha program of action. Yeah.
Thank you, Matinta. It's you talk about digital education to eradicate the poverty, promote agriculture, enough funding for ABC, the least developed countries. It's easy to say than to implement. Do you think you will get you will get the government, the leaders, African leaders, you will get listening ears from the government? Do you really believe on that as a youth? What do you think?
Okay, so there is actually a saying that I adopted from one of the young leaders here in Zambia. Her name is Dr. Natasha. She mentioned if you would want to find out what change really is, you can ask the youth of Zambia. Because the youth of Zambia showcased, I think, in the previous election what change really is. So if young people stand united, they say there's the power in numbers, they have got the power to influence what is on the ground. The issue that we find in young people is that most of them are uninterested if it doesn't concern money. Of course, we cannot run away to say we cannot run away that people are hungry, people don't have jobs, but then they have not really been given enough capacity to know that you choosing a better leader and you influencing certain policies is the same thing that is going to help you to eradicate poverty. So there's still a lot to do, and I believe, yes, the young people have a lot of power in their hands to influence policies regarding agriculture and digital platforms. It's just like I talked about the education process that we need to talk about more by also looking at the curriculum, the type of curriculum that we are giving to our students, because the curriculum has got the capacity to shape an individual. So it should be beneficial for an individual. I pray that most of the schools take up agriculture as something that every citizen should adopt, because at the end of the day, the world is going digital, and if you'll find that there won't be jobs anymore, but then people need to eat, so they need to also do of course the aspect of farming. So those are the things that we need to let our people know, that it's going to happen, and whether we like it or not. Yeah, I think young people are capable of doing anything in this life. Yeah.
Thank you, Motinta. Actually, I would like to go back to a question asked by John Daniels. You are talking about Zambia, but which other countries were there? And the reason why I'm asking that, in this platform, we try to have that philosophy that we don't talk about Zambia or Zimbabwe or Senegal or Ghana. We talk about Africa. So to promote the Pan-Africanism. So in which country was there, and did you try to get together in unity, instead of being Zambia or Ghana, but Africa? So what do you have to say? Which country was there, and what was, all the interconnection in terms of, the African countries?
Okay, so in this case, I can say the countries that were there, like the least developed countries, where if I can remember a few, we had, of course, my country, Zambia. We had also Malawi. We had, is it, we had, is it Sierra Leone, Somalia. We had, of course, Guinea, Republic of Guinea, Guinea-Bissau. We also had other the countries I can remember from small islands. We had Timor-Leste. We had Tuvalu. We also had I can remember we had but Nigeria wasn't there. South Africa wasn't, because these are not least developed countries according to, I think, their classifications. Even Zimbabwe wasn't there. So we had also Uganda wasn't there. It was kind of like removed due to some internal issues, I think, that we don't know about, but it was removed from there. We had Ethiopia. We had is it Namibia wasn't there. Also we had Eswatini wasn't there. Sudan was there, Republic of Chad was there, and many more. So we could sit together, of course, and Ivory Coast also was there. We could sit together and perhaps talk about on what we could do. I made a bond.
I think we are losing her again. Maybe while she's trying to go back, Dr. Pindo, maybe I would like to revisit a question from the second question from the listener. The listener was saying the old generation must look at the facts that we are handicapped with limited opportunities for advancement. Today, the old must look at the issues many of us seem to have forgotten. Our advancement came through unity and in the sharing of information. Dr. Pindo.
You know what? I really love that comment. I love that, the questions that are actually implied in that, because oftentimes, Dr. Diallo, we have said education or information is empowerment. So you find that as long as our educational system is not really designed to create thinking minds and innovative minds within Africa, we are continuing to shoot ourselves in the foot. So that listener, that participant has excellent insights and perspectives that really ought to be analyzed even further. Because I think if we look at where we are today in Africa, a lot has to do with leadership. And so as leaders, if those of us who are older of this generation, if we fail to actually say what practical things are we leaving for the next generations in terms of their advancement, in terms of their education, we are not really preparing them a whole lot. I remember one of our guests from Ghana said, and he was bemoaning the fact that he feels that he has not prepared the next generation of Ghanaians to take on the baton, and pass the baton to them so that they will do something with it. So, for example, we're talking about digital education, and here we are struggling with networks. It's a reality. We cannot move away from that. But then, when we have other people who are setting the agenda in terms of who is who gets, a seat, in some of these conferences, who gets to participate, it really makes it very, very complicated. For example, nothing against the UN. Here is the UN that has not recognized Africa in such a way that with the population of Africa, how many seats do we have at the UN? I mean, it's pathetic. And then you ask ourselves, okay, our African leaders, the AU, were they part of the process that participated in organizing this conference for young people? What was their contribution? I mean, we're talking about a leadership mindset that really has to happen. We're talking about transformational leadership here. We really need to shift the way we have done things, because it is not helping us to move forward. So I agree with the thought that our older generation, us who are older, let's invest in these young people. Let's move away from education that looks for a job. Let's move to education that creates jobs. That is what making the economies around the world thrive. People are creating jobs. Everybody can't be selling stuff. We all can't be selling clothes on the market. We need to be creative, but oftentimes we end up with the low-hanging fruits. Everybody getting the same thing and doing the same thing and hoping that at least I will get $1 or $2, for the day. But let's think beyond. And I think this is where our education system from our our uh, our heads of state need to say, let's have an education that is relevant, an education that engages our young people. When we develop the curriculum, who designs the curriculum? Is it the bureaucrats who come up with the old colonial mindset? I know what your education should be, so this is what you should be learning. And so when you get this, you get a certificate, and then you look at job, to work for me. Let's move away from that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pendo. And actually, Mutinta, I will go back to you. So the listener was saying our advancement came through unity and in the sharing of information. In Qatar, and you list a few, many countries, what we call LDC, least developed countries, African countries. Have you engaged in unity or sharing information between African countries? You are muted.
Okay, so what was done amongst our young people is we created, like, well, thankful to digital platforms, we created a WhatsApp group where we do exchange of ideas, and also we share challenges that we are facing in our various countries. Also, we have created like a bond with from one youth delegate also from Mauritania, and another one from Congo DRC, and also from Chad. So we kind of like have conversation and over what we could do in our various countries, of course being LDCs. But then the question that was, or rather the statement that was being raised amongst us was, we should not be proud of ourselves calling ourselves LDCs. You know, we should be calling ourselves developing countries, because at the end of the day, if a child is born and then you keep on telling them you are dumb, you are not intelligent, they'll grow to know that they are not intelligent at all. That's the same thing. If they keep on calling us LDCs and we are happy about it, we'll continue to be LDCs. So we would rather call ourselves as developing countries. But how do we change our status? Of course, it is through, of course, social accountability, by teaching our people from where we come from on how to hold their leaders accountable, and also how to track resources where they come from, through, of course, having the community scorecards, scoring their leaders if they are performing to what they said they'll implement, and also lobbying for decision making spaces and sitting on those tables. But then I raised up a point and said, it's not about just us raising a is it advocacies messages to sit on the table. Are we able to deliver as young people once we are given those spaces? And if we are given the spaces, can we do the work with competency? So we are the ones somehow who are killing ourselves. It's like we have those people that raise red flags and those the whistleblowers who want spaces. At the end of the day, they can't deliver. At the end of the day, they are not maybe competent enough. They don't have enough skills to do that. So I suggested, first things first, before we, as young people, stand and start saying we need spaces, let us work on ourselves. Let us get enough mentorship. Let us get enough capacity. The house is bigger enough for all of us to be there. And if we accommodate each other, also from the other generation, the generation X and the Gen Zs, we cooperate, we'll be able to find that we are going to not have all these challenges that we speak about being called least developed countries at the end of the day. So yes, conversations are coming up, and I pretty much I can say that a lot of young people, like on my page, my social media page, are coming to me asking me exactly how I got into the spaces and what the consistency. How do I get the consistency to go on even when I don't have funding? So I get to speak to them about, first things first, being passionate and angry about something that you would want it to change, and yet you can't see it being changed, and also sitting and planning and finding ways of how you can be part of that change. So those are the things I speak to my people on my social media platforms. And creating enough mentorship and advocacy for whoever is going to be inspired of what I do. I should not just be showing them pictures that I did this and that, but I should show them the way in how to stay consistent and also maintain to create resilience at in all the things you do. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mutinta. Actually, there is another interesting question from a listener. And the listener was saying, developing Africa with the youth is an excellent topic to wake up the establishment. How do you see, Mutinta, towards this journey in 5 years? Mutinta.
Okay, so for me, I feel with there's a little hope because from what I can see, young people are starting to take keen interest in the matters of development. The reason why I say a little hope is that young people can be complicated at some point, because today they will do this and they'll be happy that they're doing this, but then when something comes up that entices them, they will maybe quickly change direction and go to there is no consistency, if I can say that. So it will be very ignorant of me saying we are going to see change, everything will change in the next 5 years, because you can tell from how is it the days are going, the weeks, years. Soon it will be 5 years and we'll still be at one place. Maybe we just move like 2 steps ahead and then 4 steps backwards. So 5 years is a little time. Like maybe the United Nations Secretary General mentioned, I would copy from him, say we don't have time. And all those goals that we've set up, I feel we don't have enough time to attend them, because each and every one of those 17 goals, they are interrelated. So if we say we are doing well in maybe goal number for climate change, or goal number 1 for poverty, eradicating poverty, but then if we still have of course other issues in climate change and so on and so forth, we are still not doing it. So it's about us being holistic enough if we want to see something, at least a little change in the 5 years to come. So what I can just say in a nutshell regarding to the question is that a little hope is there, because I can see interest on my part. Yeah.
Thank you, Mutinda. Maybe Brother JB, John Donald, what do you have to say?
Oh, I think there's been an interesting program. I think it has been an interesting program, and our guests have started to answer most of the questions. But my thing is that, I mean, the way he listed the African countries that came to the conference in Qatar, don't you think when we creating these programs and activities in the various African countries, it will be more worthwhile? Because I noticed that when you go to the EU, they have the body, the main body at where the various commissions for youth affairs, for sea, for forestry, and what have you, for trade and what have you, so that at any given time, there's somebody monitoring in the various countries whether the programs or decisions that they're taking is being implemented. But in Africa, all these people, non-nations or some of these countries, which can be invited for such useful programs, they invite individual African countries. So when after the program they go home, they go to the individual countries, and nobody is monitoring to find out whether what they learned there is being implemented or is being beneficial to those countries. And that's what I think Africa and the AU should be interested in. Youth is a very big segment, very important segment of Africa, youth activities. So definitely there should be a strong secretariat or commission for youth affairs, which will monitor all these programs, useful programs, so that we make sure that the various African countries implement them. And going forward, I think we should take note of that. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you, John, Brother John. So, Mutinta, before I let Dr. Francis Mpindu has the floor. Mutinta, developing Africa with the youth, someone was saying, one of the listeners was saying, is an excellent topic to wake up the establishment. Do you think so? Mutinta?
Sorry, perhaps repeat the question.
Yeah, developing Africa with the youth is an excellent topic to wake up the establishment. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it is a very interesting topic to look at because everything these days revolve around the youth, and we need to have more conversation regarding the youth and how best the youth could be helped to realize the power they have. So it is a very interesting topic and a good one for that matter because I think um, we have a lot to do and we have a lot to talk about, and it should be an ongoing conversation. It should not just be during election time, it should not just be during conference time. It should be something that should be our daily bread, and we should speak about it every day, for it is a good topic and it is for our generation. So yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Mpindu.
Thank you, Dr. Diallo. I'm just going to mention three things here. I know that our time is slipping away. I am delighted to hear our daughter of the soil of Africa, Mutinta Masoe, mention that there were 17 goals that were established. I think it'll be very, very important to get those goals sent out, not just to those who were there, but even the ones who were not there, because remember, somebody selected who was going to go there. So I wish our young people would creatively find a way to share those goals so that they can share the information and educate others. Number two, I agree with the thought that the label LDC is very delimiting and it's not a good one. It's like people have continued to put labels on us. For example, when people say Black people, we did not negotiate that label, and it's a very limiting one. And so we should not be embracing this. The least developed countries by whose standard? So we need, I appreciate the point she made about we should be talking about developing countries because we are all developing. Nobody has arrived yet. We are all developing. Even in some of the so-called developed countries, there are all kinds of things that are happening there that will just that will make you roll your eyes, because developed countries are not supposed to treat people like that. You know, we have here in North America where we have native indigenous people who owned this land before the settlers and the colonizers came. In most of our countries, in Canada and the US, the indigenous people are not being treated well, the way they should be treated, because they are the owners of the land. Now, if you are developed, why would you have some communities that don't have running water, but you send millions and millions of dollars in other parts of the world to show that you are a generous nation, but your own people in your own backyard, they're not being taken care of? If you are developed, you don't treat people like that. You don't capture someone's child and take them away without their consent. Developed nations don't do that. Okay, so number three, the venue really matters, Dr. Diallo. I really think even though it is good exposure for young people to be taken to Qatar, get that exposure, that has its place. But let's remember there are other countries in Africa where they have had this conference. Help them to see what African countries are doing so that they learn and actually say, if such an African country is doing this, we can do the same. So I really think that I'm not knocking out the idea that it was not good for them to get exposure. I like that exposure. It's important for them to be wowed. But I think we also need to understand that there are some people who are playing subtle games here and hijacking the agenda. The UN, it's a good organization, but they have some challenges. You know, the Qatar government, they have their own personal reasons for doing this. The World Bank, they have their own reasons for doing this. Let's engage ourselves at those levels and transform the mindset. We ought to change the way we think and be analytical enough to actually say, how come these countries have developed this much? How come we are not developing ourselves? Who is holding us back? Nobody except ourselves. So let's think beyond that and then look into analytical aspects of what has contributed to our own underdevelopment and change things. So young people, Mutinda, thank you so much for being part of this, and we are expecting great things from our young people, and we are here to actually say, what can we do to support you? So
thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mpindu. Thank you. I totally agree with you when you talk about, those negative labels like LDC, least developed countries, and other labels, towards African countries, African fellows. Thank you very much, Dr. Mpindu. Very quickly, Brother JB, very, very final words, because we are over 10 minutes today, because, it was so interesting, the topic today. We run over 10 minutes. Quickly, Brother JD, before final words.
I re-echo my former statement that all the African countries have difficulties with training the youth or empowering of the youth. So, like Dr. Mpindu just said, if the AU was working that conference, then we would have had a central body. The programs learned or the issues learned will be replicated in all the African countries to empower our governments to empower the youth. But here it was some few African countries labeled as LDCs were invited and they were given this knowledge, and they came to their various countries individually. Who is monitoring to find out that what was learned is being implemented in those countries?
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Final words, Mutinta, quickly.
Okay, so my final words is that young people should continue creating resilience in ways that they know better on how to, because you can only be you can only be young once, and it is the time to create impact now, so that we don't live in regrets in the future. And mostly also to maybe the leaders out there, they should not see us as threats, but they should see us as problem solvers and solution makers, because we have a lot on our hands that we are willing to give out there and to showcase. Like they say, is it an old broom knows all the corners of the house, but a new broom, yes, can sweep better. So in this case, yes, our leaders, they can know all the corners they have the experience, but we have fresh ideas. And as the world is evolving, we have a lot to offer. So the only thing that we need, yes, is space. But we are not just asking for space. We are asking for to sit on the decision-making tables, and we can show you what we are capable of. The only thing also that I would maybe say, during the coming COP28, we need a lot of young people from the developing countries to be there at the COP, so that they should also add their voices. What's limiting our young people to go is funding. So we need funding for young people from the developing countries, so that they could attend summits like the way other young people from other developed countries attend and they add their voices. It has been a very interesting conversation, and looking forward to more of young people related topics, and mostly also intergenerational topics. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mutinta. Mutinta, Africa's youth, you and all the African youth are a vital resource for the continent's development. By investing in their education, entrepreneurship, technology, leadership, and community development, we can create a brighter future for all Africans. Thank you very much, Motinta Masawe, for coming today. And we'll have you. We'll promise, please, we'll have you very soon again, because we cannot, discuss this topic in less than 2 hours. So promise, you will be back very soon. We know how to find you, and you will be back. Thank you very much. It was so refreshing to hear you today. Thank you, my co-host, Sister Cynthia. Thank you, Brother JD. Thank you, Dr. Francis Mpindu. It was so interesting and refreshing. Thank you very much. Thank you to all our listeners today. Thank you very much. And the great questions from the listener. Thank you for tuning today. See you next week. Same platform. Bye. We love you all. Bye-bye.